You're listening to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. Today we'll be talking to the authors of the book, Artfully Teaching the Science of Reading, written by Chase Young, David Paige, and Tim Rasinski. This book helps teachers connect reading science to artful teaching, which means teaching creatively, aesthetically, and authentically. This conversation reminds us that two things can be true. We can use what we know about reading science and be creative to teach reading and writing. Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy podcast. We are thrilled because today we're going to discuss how to teach the science of reading artfully, which is such an interesting way of thinking about this topic. Melissa, do you want to share with everyone who we're here with?
Three incredible guests today. We have Tim Rasinski, David Paige, and Chase Young, who's not the football player, I found out as I was doing my Google searching. But they're all education professors from across the country and authors of an amazing new book called Artfully Teaching the Science of Reading. So excited for them to be here today. And I'll let them tell you all a little bit more about themselves, whatever they would like to share. And we can start with our return guest, Tim, if you'd like to start us off.
Sure. Glad to be back with you, Melissa and Lori. Actually, I should be the third person because I'm the third author of the book. I'm delighted with actually how the book turned out. I'm a professor of literacy education at Kent State University. I've been here 30-odd years, and before that I was at the University of Georgia, and before that I taught as a Title I interventionist and a middle school and elementary school teacher in rural Nebraska. I don't know what else you want to know about me. Reading fluency has kind of been my gig for the last several years, and we chatted about that in an earlier podcast, but what we did with this book is kind of expanded that notion of artfully teaching fluency into the whole range of literacy. But I'll let Chase and David take their cue.
All right. I guess we need to go to Chase since he is the first author.
Ooh, all right.
David, I feel like we're slighting you. I feel we don't want to slight you, David. And really, I mean, Tim, we went to you first because you really had the in, like you got everybody into this podcast because, you've been here before. So.
I know people.
you know some important podcast people.
Well, I'm glad I got to go second because I like to listen to how people introduce themselves and go ahead and model after that one. My name is Chase Young, and I am a professor of literacy at Sam Houston State University in Texas. And before that, I was an elementary school teacher. A student taught in first grade, taught second grade most of the time, taught third grade. I was a Title I interventionist as well, literacy coach. And I am thrilled to be here for the first time ever.
Welcome. So you're going to speak all of the elementary teacher language.
Yes, absolutely. Those high school teachers can smell it on me.
Love that. David, welcome.
Sure. Thank you so much. David Paige, professor of literacy at Northern Illinois University. Prior to Northern, I was at Bellarmine University in Louisville, Kentucky. And prior to that, I started my education career as a special education teacher in middle school, teaching children with mild and moderate reading disabilities, math disabilities, that kind of thing. So just delighted to be here.
Well, thank you for all of you for being here. We're really glad that you are. And I'm wondering if we just start off with a question of how did the three of you get connected? You're all over the place and clearly all professors and brilliant people. So what brought you together?
Well, I'm going to take a crack at that if I could, since I'm the old guy of the three. I'm going to take credit for actually bringing us together. I would say back in the day when I had some hair on the top of my head, I met Chase, I think, first. I was giving a lecture in Texas, Dallas area. on reading fluency, and was talking about some of the things we've continued to talk about, the use of poetry, readers' theater, and so on. And this guy came up during a break, and he says, "You know what? I've been trying some of this stuff, and you know what? It really works. Not only does it seem to improve my students' literacy, but it also gets kids motivated to read." That guy was Chase, and we started a conversation there, and been going ever since. He went on to get his doctorate at North Texas, right? Mm-hmm. And has done some remarkable stuff ever since. David, I met in Memphis, where he was a middle school teacher. I happened to be working with Bob Cooter, who was professor at the University of Memphis, and David was one of his students at the time. And we had dinner together, and David was talking to me about his dissertation study. He said, "I'm doing a study on choral reading in the middle grades." I thought, "Are you crazy? Middle grade students reading orally?"
And I love that response.
He got remarkable results out of it. And again, we just started a conversation, and then we would get together at conferences. And of course, David, Chase, and myself all have that common bond in the area of foundational reading, reading fluency. And so it just gave us a natural connection for the three of us. So that's how we started, and been going ever since.
Yeah, that's the truth. That happened.
That's the story.
That's the story. I hunted him down.
Well, I've got to add to the story just slightly. Bob, when I told Bob Cooter I wanted to do a fluency dissertation, he goes, "Oh, you need to call Tim Rasinski." And prior to my education career, I was in business for 20 years, and I've been in the music business. I've met all kinds of stars and celebrities all around the world, and no big deal. And when he said Tim Rasinski, because I hadn't read all your stuff, Tim, because there was so much. But I read half. I said, "Oh no, there's no way I could call Tim Rasinski. He's like a really big deal, and I'm not worthy." and then, as Tim said, we met at Bob's house for a conference when he came down, and it was so great. Anyhow,
that's how we felt when we asked him to be on the podcast.
Oh,
yeah. No, really, I think, Melissa, my exact words to you were, I've had a literacy crush on Tim Rasinski for probably 15 years since I read Why Fluency Should Be Hot. I don't even know when that came out. It might have not been 15 years ago, Tim, but I remember reading that. I remember being a teacher reading that and being like, "Oh my gosh, I love this. Yes, I need to do this."
That's good.
David, I totally get that.
Good.
All right, so let's talk about the book a little now. Like we mentioned, your book is Artfully Teaching the Science of Reading, and we know the science of reading is a hot topic. So interested to hear about what was your inspiration for writing a book about what it means. I can tell a little bit about what it means for artfully teaching the science of reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think if we start from the genesis of this, I believe it would have been the Literacy Today article that we did, just a short little article that kind of introduced the topic, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll be corrected if I'm not.
That's it.
And then Tim, Reading Research Quarterly, was doing this special edition on science of reading. And Tim put together a proposal, really, and asked us to join him on it around this idea of science and artfully teaching reading. And of course, and then it got accepted. And then, we spent several months writing it, and so that kind of got it started. And then Chase, you pick it up.
Yeah, I was doing a presentation virtually at LRA, and someone in there was from Routledge and asked me if I had an idea for a book. But I just finished one, and I was like, "Oh, I really don't want to write another book." And so I said, "I have one idea, and it's called Artfully Teaching the Science of Reading." And she said, "I love it." And I was like, "Dang it." But so I grabbed the trustee David and Tim, and thankfully they accepted the invitation to write. And it was just something that we had been working with for so long. And, we love the science of reading, and we are researchers by trade. And, everything we do is based on empirical research. But we also have that love of teaching reading, and and the motivation aspects and all of that that we wanted to highlight. And we thought that through this book we could do that.
Yeah, if I'm going to actually take us back even a little bit further. Science of Reading has been around at least 22 years with the report of the National Reading Panel. And I think we all have a fundamental understanding that yes, we need to teach those 5 pillars. But what occurred was some odd manifestations of the science of teaching reading, or teaching reading following only the science. For example, we were seeing things where kids were put into drills where they were teachers trying to get them to read faster to improve their oral fluency scores. And it just, we asked the question, does that happen in real life where people do that sort of thing, or scripted instruction where teachers have to follow, precise scripts that are written for them, and actually being enforced by the teacher police out there. And we're just, we're saying to ourselves that, we certainly agree with the notion of science, but let's not forget that there are ways of teaching fluency, teaching phonics, teaching phonemic awareness, comprehension, that don't have to be scripted, that don't have to be, tied to the outcome measures. We can find ways of doing it that are engaging. Well, we had those 3 principles: authentic, aesthetic, and I forgot the last one, creative. Right. And that, what we saw was missing in some of this instruction. And our notion was, is there a way to honor the science, but do it in these ways that kids, as you said, Chase, would find engaging and motivational and such. And that's, for me, was the genesis for this.
Yeah, and I would kind of add to that is I think we all absolutely, nothing happens without a great teacher, right? All the science in the world of reading is totally useless if it just remains locked up in academic journals and research studies. If it's not implemented and put into action in the classroom by a knowledgeable, competent teacher, then it's all worthless. So I think that's another foundational anchor of the book, is that the teacher is the most important person in all of this. Mm-hmm. And we wanted that to come through. Yeah.
And I'm going to throw one other thing in. I mentioned since 2000, the report of the National Reading Panel. Well, we're into this now for 20 plus years. And yet, if you look at the National Assessment of Educational Progress, our reading report card, as they say, things haven't changed in 20 years. We still have kids, that about a third of our students that are reading at a level below basic, and another third who are reading just at a basic level. And this is, 20 plus years of saying we got to do science. And we've got to ask the question, maybe there's got to be more than simply focusing on the science to really improve those scores.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So I'm going to assume the audience for this book is teachers. Yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Teachers everywhere.
Yep.
Teachers and pre-service.
Yeah, we're using it in our pre-service classes. So absolutely.
We intentionally made the book short. We wanted it. Right. We didn't want to be prescriptive. We wanted to throw out some ideas and some examples and say, okay, now you guys, whether you're a pre-service or an in-service teacher, now it's your chance to, take this science that we know and apply it in ways. We've given you some examples. And I think one of the things we really accomplished was the brevity of the book, and it's pretty readable. I mean, Melissa and Lori, I think,
totally
would you say
agree.
It was a readable book?
Yes. Not only was it readable, but it also was really fun to read, if I may say so. Like, I felt like I was taking all of the things that I knew about reading science and what I know to be true about, teaching using materials that are high quality. And then this was like gold, because I felt like, I know so much about reading science, but I don't always know how to make it fun. And I will say I read half the book in one day, and then I went and I work with a little guy one-on-one, and I implemented. So we did half of the lesson that I typically do. And then the last half of the session, we did word letters, we did word sorts, we made words, and we played. And it gave me a lot of confidence to play in a way that was very supportive of the reading science and the structures that I had already put in place for him. And he had so much fun. I will say word letters is like his new favorite thing. So it was just really amazing to be able to do that. And I mean, I had the book in front of me and was using it, while I was sitting there with him.
Hey, we should be interviewing you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Tell us more.
Next time I'll just record the session.
No, that's so. I mean, that's what we wanted out of this book was, folks like you working with kids that feel empowered, that you know a lot already. It's just applying that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so helpful. I feel like it might be helpful to talk about the book's structure, because that, to me, that was something that stood out as I read it. And I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at it, and then I'd love for you all to jump in. I know that you talked about the artful teaching of the 5 pillars. You talk about artful teaching of assessment and that connection to home. So I thought those were all really important pieces to name. Is there anything else that I missed that you'd like to call out for our listeners as like key components that you talk about in this book?
Well, we talked about those 3 principles that we kind of started with. The things that artful teaching is. Here we go again. Aesthetic.
Authentic. Creative.
Authentic.
Tim, we all wrote it down.
Third team.
I need to make an acronym out of it. But very quickly, at least from my point of view, aesthetic instruction is, I'm just going to use my own language here. That touches the heart. I often talk about how, reading, we use reading to educate the head, but also, we read, to get that chill down our spines, to have our hearts touched. And that should be part of our instruction as well. Not only, and of course for teachers as well. That word aesthetic, by the way, comes from a Greek word that means feeling. And that should be part of our instruction, not just the cognitive approach, but that aesthetic approach. Authentic, I go back to the work of John Dewey, who said that the instruction we provide students in school should reflect what happens in the real world. So, for, again, the quick example, you mentioned word ladders, Lori. We like to play games as adults, and many of those games are word games: Scrabble, Boggle, Wordle. If we'd like to play games, why wouldn't kids? And again, that's an example of something being authentic. And Chase and David, you can come up with examples as well. And the last one is creative. That's what teachers are. They're creative, taking that science and using it in ways that meet the needs of the students and that tap into the strengths of the teacher. And it can look different from classroom to classroom and still honor the science. So, yeah. David, Chase, how about you guys?
Well, one comment that I want to make about the book is because it covers the 5 pillars. In other words, there's some thought out there, or sometimes the science of reading is being positioned as phonics, phonemic awareness, and that's kind of it. Yes. And I think, and certainly as researchers, we the science of reading is really wide and really deep and covers a number of topics. And I think putting all the pillars in there, addressing, not just phonemic awareness and phonics, but also fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, that's really important, that science covers all of this about reading.
We appreciate that.
We really do. I love how you took those pieces, the artful teaching pieces, authenticity, aesthetically, and creativity, and applied them to the 5 pillars and applied them to the different pieces of components of reading.
Right.
That was cool.
And I think in other chapters beyond those, we talk about how to use the research and the theories to really spin the science into something that's truly artful. And I really enjoyed those chapters because it's almost like setting you free. Once you have a really good foundation and you already talked about it, Lori, you're starting with the science and, you're feeling that confidence and you're using it to create something new. I mean, the science of reading had to be created in in the beginning, I had to start somewhere, and where teachers come into play is where they move it forward. They take what we have and they just come up with new, engaging and awesome stuff to use in their classes.
The other thing I think that's happened with this book regarding the timing of it, we were in this COVID situation for two plus years. And I don't know about you guys. I'm sure you're doing the same thing. I'm doing a lot of talks to schools and to districts, and they all want to hear about the book. And there's just voracious appetite to now talk about instruction and talk about. And of course, at the same time, the science of reading has kind of gained traction over the last several years. And so the timing is just all this intersection of this has been just perfect. And people are really open now to hearing all of this and exploring it.
I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about, I'll set it up for you. I think that right now there's a big push, and I think it's a good push for teachers to learn about the science of reading, right, through professional development. That's great. I think there's a big push too to have quality materials so that they're not running around trying to, find things on Teacher Pay Teachers. And so they have quality materials. So if I'm a teacher that I have these quality materials in my school, I'm learning about the science of reading. Can you all give some examples of, I have these things. What does it mean to take something from that and do it artfully?
Sure. I guess I'll jump in. So you have these high quality materials. Let's say you have a fantastic text, right? And maybe it's a decodable text, and the students have been working on particular, some sort of phonics skills, and those texts are matched for the instruction. Afterwards, there's things you can do with it to bring it more authentic. For example, they're reading it independently, after being instructed, and then maybe they get to take that book to the teacher they had before and read it to the younger students. So there's like an authentic thing. It's like, hey, you're practicing for a read aloud. You're going to go to your class and you're going to read to the first graders, and it's going to be awesome. So let's make sure that we read this accurately, that we know how to pronounce the words, and that we read with great expression, because there's a reason for you to be practicing.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And I might take it to the level of comprehension. I think I mentioned that if you really want to comprehend something, do something with what you have. So taking that text that you have, let's say it's a narrative, and turning it into a reader's theater script, or using it in a project. Perhaps you're reading an informational text, and you're using the information that you've gotten as a way to maybe change school policy, or to write a letter to the editor of the local newspaper, whatever. When you do something with the text, you really have to understand it more deeply than simply reading something and entering into a discussion with your classmates. You're actually doing something very authentic and purposeful with that text. So, it's another example might be, we like to use the use of poetry too. When you talk about high quality materials, my question is, what's a high quality material? Is it material that's only taught in systematic ways? I think that's gotten to be sort of the way we think of it now, but I would like to think of authentic materials, poetry. I've been using song. I've got a lot of that from David with his background in music. The use of reader's theater scripts, the use of rhetoric, oratory. We'll be having students learn the Gettysburg Address here come November on the anniversary of that. These are to me, these are high quality material as well. And yet these are oftentimes the kinds of material that are missing from many of our classrooms. We've been so focused on narrative and expository texts that we've kind of pushed these off to the side.
I'll go to the other end of the continuum, when we're dealing with kindergarten children, very early learners. It's always fun to go into an elementary school like that and just watch a very young child, as they're learning something as simple as letters, learning letter sounds, And then when they finally get to put those together into something like, being able to read their name or being able to write their name, and just the incredible joy that kids get in that moment, that's unbelievable, right? And so I think when we're looking at artful teaching, that's part of it too. Sometimes it's like if you ever want to have fun with science, you have to learn the basics of science, and sometimes that's fun, and sometimes it's not all that much fun. It depends, right? But with reading, we learn these very foundational skills with reading. But there can be a lot of fun in doing that, and an artful teacher can learn how to help those children have fun while they're learning, and where their focus is now on having a good time. They don't really maybe even understand that they're learning something that's absolutely crucial to their future success. They just know they're having fun. Kind of like Chase still has fun.
But that's the best kind of learning.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a quick shout out to Chase here. Your website. He's not very modest guy. It's called thebestclass.org. But on it, he has posted Reader's Theater scripts that he and his second graders wrote many years ago. What they would do is they would read a story. You'd either read it to them or they'd read it on their own, engage in a discussion. But then what they would do is they would turn that script or the story into a script. So they would have to deeply analyze that story. I'm taking words out of your mouth here, Chase, but tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, they're engaging in the deep analysis of that, and like you said, David, not even knowing, they're engaging some high level cognitive activity, making meaning here. And then, of course, when they would
critical thinking,
and then when they would perform it, there you have the fluency because they'd have to rehearse the script.
Yeah, so. And I'll tell you some amazing stories from that. Like when I'd have my students script, they could just use a mentor text, or they could make a parody of it. And then those became choices the next week for students to rehearse and perform. And I interviewed one of the girls that had written the script. Somebody had chose her script, performed it. And I said, how does it feel? She goes, I feel really happy. And I feel like I'm going to be famous one day. And I was like, every kid should go home thinking they're going to be famous because of something they did in school that day. Right. And it was incredible. I mean, we took it to new levels where the fourth graders, they would take their own stories they had written because, fourth grade writing. And then my students would turn it into scripts. And then we'd perform back for the fourth graders, and the fourth graders would evaluate the voice that they had embedded in their writing. So it was a really cool partnership.
I love this artful discussion. Would you say this is authentic, aesthetic, and creative? Like, is it all of them? Like this example, or is it okay? Yeah,
well, creative in the sense that you're making something that didn't exist before. Authentic in the sense that Hollywood is full of writers who take other people's stories, turn them into scripts, and what's the other one? Oh, aesthetic.
Oh my gosh.
The little girl was going to
I love this.
Listen, Tim, we're going to make you a t-shirt. We're going to make you a t-shirt with these three on it.
Yeah. But you reminded me of one we have done in our reading clinic here at the university. One of the things our students do is they learn, one of the goals is to learn to read something well every day. What can you learn to read well every day? A poem. So we engage them in a lot of rehearsal and performance, but eventually we get to the point where they write their own poetry. And one of the things that they do is our last day of our reading clinic, that we have a little assembly and the parents and grandparents show up and the kids perform their own poetry. But on top of that, I will take their favorite poems, take them home in the evening, and I'll type them up into a little book. And so at the end of our reading clinic, that each child is presented with a collection of poetry that they contributed to. And, these are kids who are not very good readers to begin with. Many of them are in tears the first day they arrive in a reading clinic because they don't want to be there.
Right.
And yet here they are being a contributor to an authentic book of poetry that they participated in. To me, these are the stories that we need to have more of in our classrooms.
Yeah. And so text type is so important. We just completed a study in a different state with a couple hundred third and fourth graders that were behind where they needed to be due to the the pandemic. And yeah, I forgot all about that. And I selected 50 texts for this intervention. It's called Read Like Us. It's a version of like gradual release of responsibility and choral reading, and then some sort of authentic read to somebody else. And that'll be coming out soon. But what we really took away from it is that these kids were asking to bring home the intervention materials because they love the text so much. I mean, there was like humorous poetry, stories with a twist, scary stories. A few of the texts were actually just a list of weird state laws. Like it's illegal to buy cheese on Sunday in
I love those.
Whatever.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing.
We read those on Facebook. It's like clickbait, right? We're like, oh, that's crazy. So I started using some of that clickbait as intervention materials, and they loved it because, I mean, if you're going to repeatedly read something, it might as well be interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say what I think when I first started reading the book, I was thinking, I feel like there's a little bit of a danger here of teachers making choices based on, let's say, I think this might be too hard for my kids, so I'm just going to make it easier. Or like, I don't think they'll like that, so I'm just going to do it this way. And then the new way is actually not based on science, right? But all these examples, I'm just thankful to hear all those examples that you all just said, because it's not that, right? They are still based on science. You're still based on how do you get students to read and how do you get them to their grade level, right? Not just trying to make it easier, but how do you make it engaging and relevant to get them there? And
The Melissa, science is the foundation.
Yes.
It's what we do with the science.
Yeah. It made me think so much of, I mean, I know we can talk about science in a lot of different ways, but it's making me think about, we recently talked with Sonia Cabell from Florida.
Florida
State. I was like, Florida Center for Reading Research, but that is not where she works. She was talking about content-rich ELA, and I just feel so connected to the stories that you just shared about the poems. I just love to imagine as people share these stories, and as you all were talking, I was imagining like the students who were in, science and social studies or even content-rich ELA, writing the poetry that connects to the topics that they're learning about in those classes. And so to me, like, this is where that artful teaching comes in. It's finding that connected content, sometimes in wherever you are in your curriculum. And it doesn't have to be something separate, and those examples, Chase, you shared about clickbait, they're so cool. They're like anytime ones, but I was thinking in terms of like connecting to content, that would be amazing. Like imagine every, module where you're studying the sea and you send the kids home with a poetry book of poems that they've all written about the sea at the, to practice. And then they all practice reading each other's poems. Like that to me is where it feels like the special artfulness comes in as the teacher. So I just wanted to share that. I was like making a connection to that content-rich ELA and our content that sometimes I think gets overlooked in or under publicized, I should say.
Well, it's interesting too, because, What Works Clearinghouse gets a lot of credit for some of the things we do. And one of the things on What Works Clearinghouse is establish an engaging and motivating context in which to teach reading comprehension. And we cannot forget about that one. It's got evidence. It's moderate evidence that supports reading comprehension, which is the main goal of reading.
Yeah, I like where you're mentioning, Laurie, the bringing the content in. One example that I love to share is I mentioned the Gettysburg Address. I love having students take segments of Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, or Kennedy's "Ask Not What You Can Do for Your Country," or "Ask Not What Your Country Can Do for You," and practice and perform it. But I recall several years ago, I was working with some upper elementary grade students, and they were doing the Gettysburg Address, and they started asking questions about it. What is this? What is this speech all about? And what we did then was, as a group of 5 or 6 middle grade kids, we started to dig into it. And they learned about that battle that occurred 6 months earlier, in July of 1863. And they took that content and they turned it into a script. and the script ended with the actual performance of the speech, the Gettysburg Address. And it was so inspiring to see that. These kids were engaged because they had a reason. They were going to perform. But at the same time, they were improving their fluency, but also learning quite a lot about American history, content that's quite important even to this day.
Yeah. David, when we talked earlier, you actually gave an analogy to a doctor using the science but being artful. Do you remember? Or am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah. I turn out like 5 analogies every time.
If you don't remember, that's okay.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, we'll go. What did I say about that?
I think it was, did you have surgery recently? I think it was.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I did.
it was in accordance with your knee surgery. Was it knee?
So, yeah,
am I remembering right? Okay.
Yeah, okay, so that's story.
Lori.
Okay. So yeah, I had meniscus surgery, and so I went in to see the doctor about 10 days after the surgery, and I told him how happy I was, and it felt so much better. He got all excited, so he immediately goes to his video screen. He pulls up a video of the surgery as he was doing the inside of my knee.
Gross.
And the thing that was so cool, he was geeking out. He was just geeking out. And I'm thinking, oh man, have I got the right surgeon here? He loves this stuff. And so I was driving home, I started thinking about reading and how the very best reading teachers, I think, just really geek out over how do I do this? How do I get kids more engaged? How can I make this, kind of fun for kids and still get the essential learning that they have to have? And I think that's what I was talking about in relation to that. And, not everybody does that. Not all doctors were like this guy. Not all teachers are like this. But I think we can definitely get there. And it's where we want to go, where we really, and it really comes down also to understanding the content of reading. I always talk about literacy and reading. It's a content area, just like biology is. Yeah, even though so often we give students 1 or 2 semesters to learn it, which is not sufficient. But it's a content area. But when you start getting that content under control, within your schema and understand how it can come together, then I think you can really start looking at the art of how can you make this interesting, because you understand how to manipulate all these pieces, regardless of the curriculum that you might be using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I might add
That's
that
so
your doctor probably told you also, David, here's some options for, improving your knee performance. Maybe flight of steps, walk a mile, maybe if you're going on vacation, walk on the beach, whatever, again, giving you options that are authentic and that meet your own particular needs. That's the art.
That's right.
Might add that we talk about the medical arts more, I think, than we talk about the medical sciences, even though medicine is a science. But, this still has that artful dimension to it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really critical point. Is I do think that there's a perception sometimes, or there could be on the part of teachers, that there's this whole big thing called the science of reading. And it's scary. I don't understand it. I don't know what it is. But somewhere in there is the answer to everything. And, I heard a doctor interviewed on the radio one day. He says, we have data to back up just a percentage of what all we do. Yeah. That's why it's called the medical arts, to Tim's point. And so I think teachers need to understand the same way that there are fundamental processes and ways to go about teaching things that we know work. But it really does come down to the individual teacher as to how you're going to put all that together and, understanding this whole process. And I think within all of that becomes the art of how, sometimes there's more than one way to get to something, right? And they can both work equally well. And I do think the other thing is to never forget, and because we all have a favorite teacher that we had at some point in our career. And when you think about what made that teacher your favorite, lots of times for whatever reason, there was personality involved. Mm-hmm. The individual had some kind of personality that you related to, that touched you, that connected with you. And I think I think that's part of being an effective teacher. That's part of the art. And teachers have different personalities. That but that's all. That's all in the mix. Yeah, it's the aesthetics. It's in the mix.
Right.
Yep. I always hear, not everything has to be fun. Not all instruction has to be fun. But I retort, but if you can make it fun, shouldn't you? I mean, you don't have to keep it boring.
I mean, unloading my dishwasher is not fun, but when I put a song on the Spotify and try to do it in under that song, it is so much more fun than if I'm just like, it's time to unload the dishwasher.
I always see families in the movies having so much fun throwing dishes around and stuff. So yeah.
I can't say that that's exactly my house, Chase, but I aim for that.
Well, Lori, I have a certain way I do when I unload the dishwasher. Sometimes I change it up.
Ooh.
I just change it up. Oh, yeah.
What do you do?
Oh, instead of starting at the top, I'll start at the bottom. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You did it.
Wild.
The water goes everywhere.
Sometimes I just wash the dish after I'm done eating and put it to the side.
Oh, no, that's radical.
That is insane.
That's too much.
You're really getting artful and creative.
Oh, my goodness.
But if we end up at the same end point,
clean dishes,
unloaded.
Why not?
Yeah,
dishwasher
dishes are clean.
Yeah,
dishes are exactly. They're put away.
Clean. Yeah, dishes are clean, ready to put away. Exactly.
And nothing got broken.
And, I want to add something to all this too. Talking about endpoints, what we've done in the book is we've actually shown that when you do these artful approaches, you end up with the results that you want. Better readers, more motivated readers, kids who are see themselves as readers. Mm-hmm. So, we're not just dismissing the science at all. We're actually perhaps putting another layer of science, saying that, yes, these are not just artful and scientific approaches, but there's documented research, so many of which we've done ourselves, that show that you get those results that you want.
Yeah.
If we bring together several different things, we got these NAEP results that Tim mentioned earlier that for the most part have not really substantially improved in 30 years, despite the literally trillions of dollars that get spent by school districts. And but then intersect that with why people become teachers. People become teachers, most everybody, because we want to help kids. We want to help kids learn, right? We like that we want to see that happen.
Yeah.
And so, I've talked to so many elementary teachers over the years that, in a way they've kind of gotten beaten down. Things aren't working well for them. They're upset about it. They don't know what to do. And so I think that's part of what we're doing with the book, is really bringing out some strategies and things that will help kids. And there's nothing more motivating for a teacher than to hear a kid reading better. I mean, because that's what you're in it for, right? Nobody's in it to get rich. We're in it to help kids read better. And when you hear that, that's the reward that you just cling to. And I think that's a big part of the book, that these strategies will help to that end.
Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me so much of some work we did here in Baltimore. The teachers did in Baltimore around fluency. And, they had fluency work in their middle school curriculum, but the teachers found that it wasn't quite working, right? And they were actually in a fellowships, they were able to do continuous improvement, which kind of freed them up to say, okay, well, that's not working the way that it's laid out. What can we do?
Can you share what wasn't working? Can you just?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a homework assignment, right? So they were being sent home. And David, you taught middle school, so you can say how many of your kids went home and did their homework every single night?
Yeah.
100%, right?
You're right.
And especially when it's a fluency, that fluency work is not something you can really, the teacher can't tell the next day, did they do that or not? It's not something you can really capture on a piece of paper for a student to hand in, right? So they can say they did it, but the teacher doesn't know whether they did it or not. But what was great about this work was that the teachers, they were able to talk to experts. They talked to Tim, they talked to David Levin, they talked to other experts to find out what our best practice is. And then they tried things with their students to see what what did help them get to that point, David, of like, oh, now they are reading better. I can see they're doing something. I tried it differently, and now it's actually working. And that was a really great experience. And a lot of when I read this book reminded me of that time, because the teachers were able to like really kind of, I don't want to say play, but they did play around a little bit to find what worked best for their students.
One of the coolest things that happened to me when I was teaching, I had a class, kids with reading disabilities, and I started implementing choral reading. And I found out really fast, of course, they didn't want to do it, that I needed a stronger backbone than what they had. and it took really about 3 weeks. And after about 3 weeks, it was going really well, except for 3 boys in the back of the class. They just, they literally, I'd hand out the sheet for them to read with the passage. They literally would take it and just flip it in the air and let it fly to the floor. And so, my attitude is, well, I'm moving forward with those who want to move forward with me. And I did. And it was on a Thursday of the 3rd week. And we practiced the script, and the kids were just doing it. And we got done reading it. And little Kayla in the front of the class, she goes, "Ooh, Mr. Page, that sounded good." And it was like, and she was a bit of an opinion maker in that class. It was like she turned around and said, "Hey, you 3 in the background, it's okay if you want to read now." And they started reading after that.
I love that. And
it was just one of the biggest turning points. And so I ended up writing an article in the Reading Teacher about choral reading. And that's just what you have to do, and kids want to feel successful. And these kids were feeling successful.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And if I might add a little bit of research that we've done recently, David was talking about the boys in the back. Well, we did an 18-week study using a reader's theater format. It was a weekly format that targeted reading fluency, reading comprehension, and vocabulary. So each day there was a bit of each, and they'd perform on Fridays. And the great part is first of all, anecdotally, some of the kids that were struggling got to practice all week, and for the first time ever, they stood next to their peers and sounded like a great reader, reading aloud, and that was such a big confidence builder. Now, some of the results of this study indicated that, treatment versus control. Treatment significantly outperformed on the reading comprehension measure, but also we did a secondary analysis, and we split out boys and girls in treatment and control. And at pretest, there's that gap where boys were not doing as well as the girls. And that was true for decoding, vocabulary, and reading comprehension in both groups. But the treatment group that got the reader's theater, by the end of the 18 weeks, that gap was gone. They were performing similarly. And in the control, the gap still remained. And we were literally flabbergasted. We didn't know. We were like, oh my gosh, what a great finding. But we didn't know why. So we actually ended up surveying about 100 boys that participated in Reader's Theater and asked them, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And essentially, it's actually kind of funny. One of the questions was, does Reader's Theater help you read better? And one of the responses was no, because it's fun.
Oh, that's funny.
But after our thematic analysis, we found out that the boys really enjoyed the collaborative aspect, the performance aspect, and because the scripts were somewhat humorous, they also liked, entertaining their peers. So those were some of the findings from that.
And
so,
as you mentioned, Chase, they were successful.
They were successful. They were feeling
Listen
it.
to me read. I can read. Yeah.
Did you say 18 weeks?
Yeah, it was 18 weeks.
Okay, that seems like really manageable as a teacher to be like, okay, I can. That's what I love about fluency. I mean, if I may just say that, it's a quick win for educators. And I don't think in teaching we have a lot of quick wins. Yeah. So that to me feels like a really quick win.
Yeah, the School Library Journal called it the silver bullet at one point. And, it's great. And, and it takes about 5-10 minutes a day. The first study we did, I looked at, what am I doing for 5 minutes that isn't having an impact? And, dumped
probably a lot of things.
I think it was DOL that I ended up getting rid of, the daily oral language half sheets, that they fill out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So bye-bye that.
You know what strikes me here, too, is you created noise. Like the students who benefited or the students who got to orally practice, I mean, it's noisy, it's fun, it's impact.
I like noise.
They're able to talk and practice and build their confidence. And I mean, you just said it benefited boys a whole lot there. And that I think is a component of that. And not that girls also, all children, I think, enjoy noise to an extent. But, you know, I just want to make sure that like we say that. But I think that the noise factor is important, that we're allowing them to be louder, express themselves, encourage that. That's important.
You know, Lori, besides the motivation and engagement portions that you just talked about, I think fluency, particularly in older elementary and some middle school kids, I think one of the reasons it works is that so many kids, they haven't done really enough reading to really ground all those letter sound connections. Yeah. It's not that they don't know how to decode or they just are not very good at it yet. They haven't had a lot of practice. And I think a lot of these fluency strategies that we're talking about here, you know, provide that practice in a fun and engaging way. And it just goes to show that they just need to get over that hump. They need more practice with this. And as they do, it comes together, and it can come together, you know, much faster just because they haven't engaged very much in it. And I think that's why so often this is successful.
Yeah. What I like about Chase's study is that these students, they had a reason to engage in the practice because they're going to perform on Friday, you know, when we have our poetry cafe or our Readers Theater Festival. And, you know, sometimes we think about things like Readers Theater and poetry. These are things we use on Right to Read Week or, you know, these special occasions. And I think we need to break out of that trap and say this is something that should be done on a regular basis. 18 weeks, very manageable. Took 20 minutes per day at most, perhaps, for the kids to do. A lot of the practice could be done independently. So we need to, you know, think about the artfulness. We often do the artfulness on those special days. Right. We need to expand that artfulness throughout the school.
Yeah, Readers Theater about St. Patrick's Day. There are no research studies out there that say that Readers Theater works in a week.
Right.
Really good point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, before we start to wrap up, is there anything else about the book that you want to make sure that our listeners hear?
It's a great
book. I really had a great time writing it. It was probably the most fun book that I've written. So
I can tell from the three of you working together that it was probably
fun. It was the
fun.
fastest book. Yeah. I think, Chase, it was it took about 4 months to write the entire book, wasn't it?
Yeah. Because we
How
had a deadline of a year.
How long do books typically take?
Oh, years.
We had a deadline of a year, and I told them that we should really put this as a priority because the field would benefit. And so we.
Yeah, I think I remember, Chase. You took that year and crunched it down to 6 months. I did.
And they listened. But they listened.
Nobody was doing anything anyway, so
yeah. But I think what happened is we had all this bottled up inside of ourselves, and it's just a matter of letting it spill out, and then you know, chatting with one another, talking to teachers out there who are doing this kind of stuff, and you know, it was such an as you said, it was an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, we actually surveyed. It was. We shared a survey with a bunch of educators to just say, hey, what are some of the artful things you do in your classrooms? And we'd read it and evaluate them, and we added those anecdotes in the book as well. So
that's so fun. That's where they came from.
Yeah,
many of them.
I love that.
Except for the viviparous thing, that was me. I was sitting there next to that preschooler that made me feel
love that.
Like
that
a
was a
dummy
great
face. Oh my gosh! And then, you know, not to reveal too much, but then he's like, "Oh yeah, my dad's a Blue Angel pilot." I'm like, "Okay, you're just the best thing ever."
That's funny. That's in the very beginning of the book too. Oh, not very beginning-ish of the book. So
Page 11.
Page 11. There we go. So I think we're going to bring this to a close, but we have a special question for you to reflect on about your book at the end of this closing. So keep that in mind. I'll start here, and we're going to ask you each a question, and then we'll ask all three of you a question. So we have a quick response, like a fast,
just for fun,
fun round of questions. Tim, I'm going to start with you. What do you love to read?
What do I love to read? I love to read It's not a quick answer, is it?
Research
I like to read
articles.
everything. I like to read newspapers. I like to read Reader's Digest magazine articles. I like to read informational text, interestingly enough, more so than narrative. And I like to read things that inspire me. So I will read poetry. I will read famous speeches from American history and those sorts of things. That kind of all over the place.
That must be why a lot of them made it to your fluency books, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, David, you're up next.
Well, I really like.
Oh,
Yeah.
hang on. You get a new question. Get ready.
We're rapid firing here. Go ahead.
What do you love to watch?
I think. So you're talking about TV, I think, right?
Could
Or
be
anything.
Well, okay. I'm going
I
to
think someone said bird watching. I think at some point.
So I'm going to go. Well, so we've got a large yard here at the house up in Wisconsin and a big patio, and it's amazing how many birds we have in the backyard. All kinds of birds, all kinds of woodpeckers,
See?
red birds, all kinds of things. And we sit out there in the evening with adult beverages, and we love watching the birds. They fly across all 3 yards, kind of. It's several hundred yards across here, and that's really fun. So,
That's so cool.
I enjoy that. Yeah. It's a very different. It's quite the distraction. It gets me off of everything else, so I enjoy that.
Sounds very peaceful and
Mhm.
very
It is.
different from Netflix. So
Yeah, you'd love my
Yes.
neighbors.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
All right, Chase, you get another question. What do you love to listen to?
Oh, so my favorite genre is punk. I like
Nice.
punk rock.
I didn't expect that.
In particular, I like Irish punk. So like Dropkick
I didn't
Murphys,
expect
Flogging
that.
Molly.
Okay. Yeah. So like is St. Patrick's Day your jam?
I love St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
I celebrate wholeheartedly.
That is amazing. We're going to add
Love
a link in our show notes to Dropkick Murphys there.
Right.
Do it right
Actually,
now.
funny story. One of the articles we wrote about the boys results was called "The Boys Are Back and They're Looking for Drama," and that is a parody of "The Boys Are Back" by Dropkick Murphys, and
Oh
all
my
of the
gosh.
headings are actually lyrics from the song.
That is funny.
That's great.
This is awesome. Thank you for sharing
I'm
that.
going to answer that question too, because I like listening to Broadway musicals.
Oh, I do
And,
too, Tim.
I know the words to all the songs. All you have to do is give the words in print, and the next thing you know, I'm reading, right?
Oh,
And that's what we do. With a lot of our
Oh, look at you, Tim. One last fluency strategy.
Always teaching us lessons.
I know. I shared in our fluency podcast that I have, we have, I don't know, Amazon or Spotify or something, and it's connected to Alexa. And what I do is I put on the TV, I'll just say like play blah blah blah, like play country music or play pop music,
Irish punk.
and that's going to be my next one. And the words come on the screen, and I notice when the kids in the neighborhood are here, they all stand in front of the TV and just watch the words, and then they'll start to sing along, and then I'm like, oh, so good. Thank you for building your fluency while you're hovering in front of the songs.
There's actually a study that the What Works Clearinghouse reported on and said that that's a great approach to improving. This was with high school students. They called it karaoke reading.
Yeah,
but
we did a study with elementary with second graders.
You've got the
reported.
assisted reading that the science tells us about, but also in an artful way. So
That's
throw
way
away your
better than
karaoke machine.
when I used to have to pause the tapes to write down the lyrics. Because
Oh my gosh, in your notebook? Yeah.
Yes. But it was actually probably pretty helpful for everything we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Our last question, this is for everybody. You guys can jump in, is what is your hope for this book?
Well, so my hope is that we create better readers, more kids who love reading and are better at it. That's basically my goal every day when I wake up. So that's it. That's mine.
Mine would be that we open up the discussion here, that it's not just a matter of science or art, but that, we cross-pollinate, if you will, and challenge each other to think in these creative sort of ways. So that, it's not, I don't know, just we continue this conversation like we're having right here. but enlarge the audience.
I really hope that it empowers teachers to use what they know about the science and give them just permission to make it awesome, and adjust it to meet the needs of their students in the classes. And every year it seems like you think you have it, and then you get this new group and they're totally different. And so I want them to be able to dynamically shift, right, using all of their great knowledge to teach their kids to read the best they can.
For sure.
I love that. And I think in education, we have a tendency to be black and white, right? Like you're teaching the science of reading or you're not. And so I just really appreciate what you all just said of like,
David Pearson talked about, and this is years ago, being in the radical middle.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are. We see both sides, and it's just, finding a way of integrating it.
Yeah. I really do think that that's what it's going to take to I don't want to say get everyone on board, but I don't know how another way to say it, to help, have everyone who is maybe starting to learn about the science and those who are very already steeped in it to really come together. I think this approach is what's going to help make everyone a believer,
Yep.
I'm hopeful.
I am too.
Very good. We are too. Yep.
Thank you all.
I know. Thank you. This has been so delightful. So thank you so much for being here.
You are so fun to talk to. Thank you.
A lot of fun.
Right? We can do this all day, but we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, literacy lovers. We release a new podcast episode every Friday and share more resources in a newsletter on Tuesday. Sign up for our newsletter at literacypodcast.com. Each week, you'll receive important information, resources, and connected content.
We're excited to create a space for community discussion about our podcast. We want to connect with our listeners and support you in answering your questions. But we also realize there are a lot of other educators out there who have great advice and experience too. Let's keep learning together in our Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast Facebook group, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
If the content in this episode helped you, share with a fellow educator and teacher friend. Our literacy lover community welcomes educators at every stage of their learning journey. We're so glad you're here to learn with us.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast in this episode are not necessarily the opinions of Gray Minds PBC or its employees.